Hello and welcome to my first public Kerbal Space Program video. In this video, as you could probably tell from the title, we are going to be flying a DO-31 German VTOL aircraft recreation to one of the new hidden launch sites in 1.12. Here we can see our aircraft on the runway. It takes time for the jet engines to spool up because of the way they work in Kerbal Space Program, and to achieve the maximum thrust that was necessary to take off, it took a bit of time, but here you can see we have taken off now, and we're just going to retract our landing gear. And we are in the air. Here we're going to speed up the footage a bit while we ascend vertically from the runway. The trick with a VTOL aircraft is that it can take off vertically, as you've just seen we've done, which allows you to not need a runway to gain speed to generate lift with your wings. The trick is, if you want to switch to horizontal flight, you still need to get the horizontal speed somehow to be able to get lift from your wings and fly properly. So what we end up doing is, once we reach about 1 kilometer in altitude I find is safest, we enter a dive, as you can see here, shifting our jet engines to point backwards, and we're picking up speed as we're falling, and we're going to eventually be able to pitch up and enter a stable horizontal flight, as you can see us doing here. I tend to start this dive at about 1 kilometer in altitude because this provides enough space for you to have a decent safety net in case you don't pitch up as fast as is possible with the aircraft, while still being a reasonably low altitude to get to before you switch to your faster horizontal flight to get wherever you're going. Speaking of which, we are now traveling towards a waypoint that I placed using a satellite in polar orbit of Kerbin. You can use a satellite in orbit to scan a surface feature, which is what I did, and in doing so I was able to find an anomaly, which in this case is hopefully a launch site, which we can find. The trick is, when doing this, is that you might not get your waypoint exactly where it is. You can be within a few kilometers. So in the cargo bay of this transport aircraft, we are bringing a probe that will allow us to find the anomaly again and place another waypoint much more accurately to be able to find the launch site. But here we're just getting a nice shot of the aircraft as we're flying, and you can see a few of the design choices I've made, including the oddly large intake. The way I achieved this was just by using a Goliath engine, turning the thrust limiter down so that I'm not actually using it as an engine, and instead I'm only using it as an intake, and you can see the two of those there. The very large nose of the aircraft, that is something that is on the DO-31. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose it serves is, but it was still there, so I included it in my recreation. If you look ahead now, we can see that there are some cities with the city lights on Kerbin. These are not part of stock Kerbal Space Program. These are instead just my visual mods that I have installed. These are caused specifically by environmental visual enhancements. I also have the Parallax mod installed, the Waterfall mod, Scatterer. A list of the mods will be in the description of this video. And we're just going to continue making our way towards the waypoint, which is the closest one I could find. It wasn't actually that far, luckily, so it means we don't actually need to fly very far. This video can be a lot shorter, even though I am speeding up the footage by 2 times speed at the moment, as we are flying over the mainland. And if you look at the nav ball, you can see the point that's marking the waypoint, and you can notice it's starting to dip down, which means that we're getting closer to it, because as we get closer to it, we're still above it, but as the horizontal distance decreases, it's going to appear to be lower and lower down, and once we probably pass it, actually, we're going to land, and we'll use our probe to find the anomaly and place a second waypoint that'll be able to be much more accurate as to where it actually is. And I recorded this commentary afterwards, so I know that I see this landing site here, and I decide to veer off to land just kind of in this area where at the cities, this just grassy land, because I know I'm pretty close to the waypoint at this point, and trying to get any more accurate is not going to bother because the waypoint's not accurate. Quick save and quick load here, because this is actually a very, very, very difficult aircraft to land, at least for me, because I'm not particularly good at landing VTOLs, because, as I mentioned, the jet engines don't have consistent thrust, so as I'm trying to land and I'm adjusting my throttle to change my thrust, it's not changing consistently, which I find very difficult to land with. But here you can see our landing attempt. Now I started by shifting my 8 jet engines into reverse to kill off as much horizontal speed as I could before entering vertical flight. I then opened the cargo bays on either side of the wing tips and let those 8 jet engines also spool up. So we are landing on 16 jet engines, 8 Juno engines, and 8 Weasley engines. And we're just going to slowly coast towards the ground. It's not the most stable. It's very difficult to land vertical VTOLs in my experience, as I've mentioned earlier. You'll notice the craft is oscillating forward and backward, or pitching up and down as I'm landing. This is me trying to cancel out any horizontal velocity I still have, and then overcorrecting and seeming to need to go back the other way, because again, I'm not the best at landing these. And you can see the altimeter. I have switched it to terrain mode, so you can see our altitude over the surface rather than sea level, because we are landing on land. And we are about to touch down now, and you can see we have touched down safely. The advantage of being able to land vertically like this is we don't need any runway to land on our flat surface. We can land pretty much anywhere, giving us the versatility of a helicopter. But as you saw, as we were flying over here, we also had the range of a aircraft, or a traditional aircraft with wings. Now we're just unloading the payload I mentioned earlier, which is this little truck here. It is designed so that I can just bring the Kerbals to wherever the launch site is. I think it would be interesting to bring Kerbals rather than some kind of a probe. However, a bit unnecessarily and frivolously, I decided to add in a quadcopter, which you can see in the back of the truck there, which I am now using to place the waypoint. And you can see as I'm using CurbNet, I have a much lower field of view and I'm seeing less distance, so I can easily place the waypoint basically exactly where the anomaly is, whereas from orbit, my waypoint is very far off. You can see the difference here. And so now we're just going to separate, or drive away from the aircraft and detach our quadcopter here. Switch to the wrong thing, as I always do. I used the motors and I bound them to main throttle, which allows me to throttle them like you normally would with an engine. And we've got our nice little quadcopter here, which is another craft that can do vertical takeoff and landing, though it's not able to do a traditional forward flight like the DO-31 is. And we're just going to use it to scout out and find where our launch site is before we drive over there with the truck. Naturally, the main focus of this video is going to be on the DO-31 itself, so we can just fade through the flight. You don't need to watch all that. And we're going to start landing, and I just made a quick save here. And again, I find VTOL landings to be difficult, as I mentioned before, so we've just quickly reloaded a quick save. I think this is my 3rd attempt where I actually managed to land this, which you're now watching here. So the inspiration for this video, I should mention, is a challenge that is happening in Pilot's Discord server. You should definitely join that server, it's great. And this is one of the weekly challenges, so this is my submission. Obviously, again, the main focus being the DO-31. Now we're just landing a quadcopter and finding the launch site. And my scatter and Eve clouds are messing me up here by kind of casting me into shadow, so it's not as good of a YouTube video, unfortunately. I just didn't have really the time to re-record this. So unfortunately I just had to deal with having a bit of a dark area, but luckily they disappeared right for the landing, which is happening about now. Now. This is supposed to be like a good timed thing. I'm so bad at this. Now. It was a bit of a rough touchdown, but I was kind of running out of time, so I couldn't really do anything smoother. I think we touched down at about 6 meters per second. Now we're just driving the truck over. We're tracking our solar panels, because rovers in KSB can tip really easily, and I didn't want to break those solar panels. And now we're just going to fade over, because you don't need to watch the whole drive. And now we're close enough to have registered our Cove launch site in this little, cove is where it is, and we're just going to drive over so that our Kerbals can see it, and they can revel in the glory of having discovered a lost launch site. I don't know what the story behind these are. But we're just going to drive in here. We've got the launch site and a ramp into the water, which is interesting. I was just looking at that now. I think for any subs I try to design or whatever, I'm probably going to end up launching them from here to test them, obviously, because you've got that ramp to just launch, to put them right in the water, which is convenient. And we can do a nice pan around shot and look at our Kerbals. And they're not celebrating, unfortunately. I guess they're just very duty driven. They don't celebrate mid-mission. But we can just fade over back to our main aircraft, the DO-31, for the end of this video. Thank you for watching.